Now here on MLab, let's copy this connection string and temporarily paste it here so we can see it clearly. In this connection string, we want to replace db user with vidly user and db password with 1234. So we have the user, password, @ and then the address of our MongoDB database. Now let's cut this from here. Back in the terminal, we want to store this as an environment variable on Heroku. So we run Heroku config :set. We call our variable vidly_db and set it to this connection string. Done. So we can see we have this variable called vidly_db that is set to this database connection string. Now we need to make a tiny change in our application code and redeploy it so it can read the connection string from this environment variable. Here in this Node project, I'm using a module called config, and this config module has a few conventions. Inside the config folder, we have this default.json, which includes the default values for our application settings. We can have another JSON file for our test environment, one for production, and so on. But we also have this specific JSON file, custom environment variables.json. And in this file, we map application settings to environment variables. So here we have an application setting, JWT private key, that we have mapped to an environment variable called vidly_JWT private key. So in our development environment, our application code is reading this application setting from default.json. So as you can see, its value is unsecure key. Similarly, our application code is reading our database connection string from this application setting, db. And that's perfectly fine for the development environment, but for production, we want to read this from an environment variable. So we need to map this key to an environment variable. Back to our custom environment variables file, let's add another key value pair. The key is db and the value is vidly_db. That's the name of the environment variable that we set on Heroku, right? Save the changes. Now, before going forward, I just need to clarify that this implementation is purely specific to this Node project because here I have used this config module and that's how everything works. In your applications, you might use a different module or you might not even use Node. You might use ASP.NET Core. But the concepts I'm teaching you here applies to your platforms as well. You need to modify your application code to read the database connection string from an environment variable. All right, now we have done with changing our source code, so we need to deploy it one more time. Back in the terminal, first we need to stage all the changes, then commit them to our repository with a message like added support for reading connection string from an environment variable. Now the changes are committed to our local repository. Finally, we need to push our code to this remote repository on Heroku. So git push Heroku master. As you saw earlier, this will notify Heroku to rebuild and redeploy our application. Now let's open it one more time. Heroku open. Unlike before, our application didn't crash. We just got this error message, cannot get, because there is nothing available at the root of this application. But if we head over to /API/genres, we should get something like this. Now on your machine, you're probably going to get an empty array unless you populated your MongoDB database on MLab with some data. The reason we have two objects here is because I populated this database prior to recording this video. So this verifies that we successfully deployed our backend to Heroku. Next, we're going to deploy our frontend.